obviously hitting the panic button. I don't like clogging this gap with those units. And he's thrown a few force fields splitting the Hydras, but these Hydras do so much damage so effectively to gateway units. So this is a bad situation for Rake to be in, fighting this many Hydralisks, but he is melting through them nicely. So these heroic probes that were brought off the line here, doing their damage, but just even those last few Hydras shredding through the last semblance of Rake's defense there, the fresh units coming in to carry the day. So he really needs to transition out of these heavy gateway units, especially considering he's up against mass Hydra at this point. So he does have the robotics facility online, which is getting the observer out first, but I like it. He needs to get that Robo Bay, which is finally going up now. I'm not sure if he's going to get these Colossi out in time, because at this point Elwar has really good mass Hydra producing setup, and he should really make a move. Looks like he's throwing down an infestation pit to possibly think about mixing infestors or even going to hive tech here. So at this point, I figured that Elwar's, if he could just get 1 or 2 more batches of Hydras out, he could really go for a strong point push and just take the game away. Because now Rake's throwing down a second robotics facility, so we're going to see masses and masses of Colossi flooding this field, I imagine, quite soon, especially as he's pulling more probes onto his expansion to really saturate it and get that economic advantage. So Elwar really needs to push out, which he is doing, so maybe he can hear me.
There are a lot of Zerglings, and it's very much deja vu as far as Elwar is concerned. Hydra is supported by Zerglings. We'll see if it causes much damage as last time. These Zerglings, really tentative. They're waiting for these Hydras to get into range. They're just not really doing their damage right now. They're going for all the actual buildings instead of fighting the battle now. So these Hydras are left to fight with these Stalkers one-on-one, easily doing the damage there. Meanwhile, these Zerglings taking out these pylons and this forge. So actually a good decision by Elwar there. Now all these probes into the fight. They're starting to fight these Zerglings one-on-one. Now these Hydras doing so much damage to these probes. This is terrible news for Rake. Now these Stalkers versus Hydras. More Zealots being warped in, so they will clean up. Meanwhile, more Hydras being forced back. They were going to reinforce, but wisely deciding to move back and push again for another day. Meanwhile, Rake does have this observer sitting in front of the expansion that Elwar will likely to take, so he can at least gauge when he does need to expand again if he does need to. So good choice there by Rake just to have that observer out. It served him well and served his opponent very well the last couple of games, so good decision there. But really, he just needs to get on the offensive. He does have these Colossi out now, so that can cause a lot of damage to those Hydras if they don't get focused down. So we'll have to see what he can do with these 2 massive Colossi.
Yeah, I feel that Elwar may have just missed his window, because this is the point where, like, Hydras are so good when they first come online, and that especially in mass numbers, they are really effective against these gateway compositions. But when Protoss gets Colossi out, especially these initial Colossi before you can get your Spire online, they can do so much damage. This is terrible positioning for Elwar to be fighting, especially with an observer there. He was just basically delivering himself to be barbecued, so I don't like this. He really needs to get a nice big convex arc on these Colossi if he's going to engage them with Hydra Ling. And it's not bad fighting on the hill with these spine crawlers able to do damage from the cliffs, but now we are seeing a much better angle taken by Elwar, forcing Rake to flee, trying to just pick off these Zerglings here. These other Hydras need to join the fight, but Rake, really nice control of his Colossi there, barbecuing a bunch of Hydras. They're just totally crispy corpses on the ground. All the Hydras being fried here. Losing 1 Colossi, but Rake is now free to attack. There's nothing stopping him except for these spine crawlers, which aren't even borrowed, and the Colossi with that upgrade will actually outrange them. So at this point, this is where, as a Zerg player, you really need a Spire. He's throwing down a Roach Warren, which I feel is the incorrect choice. You need a Spire, and you need to get Corruptors online. Spine crawlers are not going to do it for you, and pumping out Hydra Roach are just going to get barbecued, especially as there's just so many Colossi online. And he saw that earlier, so Elwar should have reacted a little bit faster to these Colossi, and the sticking to Hydras and possibly getting some more Roaches is okay, as long as you have a Spire bringing out Corruptors to counter these Colossi with no air units, which is what these Protoss monsters on robotic legs are susceptible to. He's going to have a hugely tough time dealing with it, especially as there's more and more Colossi being pumped out. 2 hanging out of this expansion, just abusing that cliff walking here, especially with these destructible rocks, which is just favouring Elwar a little bit at this point, just the other units can't sneak around the back. But once this is opened up, he's going to have another direction to defend. So this is just a terrible situation from Elwar, especially as I imagine that Rake will most likely pick up on this gold expansion, which he has. So once he decides to take that out, Elwar's going to be in a terrible, terrible situation, and still no Spire online, so he's going to be in bad shape to deal with this many Colossi. 4 Colossi. Not many gateway support units here for Rake, but it probably won't matter, especially with the Spire finally going down. So this is really, really late here, and it's going to take a long time for this to come online. He does have the gas saved to deal with it, but until that Spire morphs out, these Colossi are just going to have free reign to just fry these units, and they're just back and forth microing. So I'm not sure if Elwar's going to be able to survive long enough for the Spire to come online.
These Colossi are just absolutely roasting everything. I can't believe they're still online. He could have swarmed him at this point. There's so many of them now. They've got so many kills. One of them has 19, is now ranked Master. He's a beast. So these Colossi and these drones already in line, they could have been wiped out if Rake was, you know, maybe he wanted to not risk them, but that could have been very dangerous for Elwar if he wasn't careful. Now, the problem that Rake has, if he's not careful, is that he has, I mean, he's got those Colossi, which are fantastic, but he needs some ground army to go with them, because they can get rushed and surrounded quite easily if he's not careful. And he's very much devoted himself to these Colossi. He just needs some ground army to go with them. He might be okay because he's only got roaches to go against, and they're getting smashed by these Colossi, so really not that much of a problem right now. But when this Spire goes up and he has a lot of this business going towards him, it could be a huge problem. An Ultralisk Cavern going down, meanwhile, for Elwar, so I don't know what he's going there. He does have Corruptors on the way, 4 of them lined up, so they are going to be taking out these Corruptors in a matter of seconds, but these Roaches are meanwhile going to be barbecued. So really, Elwar just has to hold on to this expansion somehow, but so many Colossi doing so much damage, these drones fleeing but getting roasted. So man, really, Elwar's on the ropes right now. He really has free to take out this expansion. He's given it up, Elwar has. So yeah, really those Corruptors needed to be out really while these Roaches were not here. So bad choice there.
Yeah, even though these Corruptors are on the field now and they will be able to deal with these Colossi, I'm not sure why he's not sending them right now, because there's no support units, there's no NEA. He'd be able to munch on these Colossi for free. It's just so delayed, that really delayed Spire. He really needs to react immediately, and these Corruptors finally going to work. Starting to work on this massive bunch of Colossi with so many kills. There's an Executor rank Colossi with 26 kills, which is just ridiculous. And Elwar's really against it, despite having his gold expansion starting to hum for him here. I feel that Rake was just able to do so much damage, and once you can support this with enough NEA, more Colossi being built. It's just never going to see such a huge group of Colossi, and they're going to be so vulnerable to all of these Corruptors. But they're going to have these Roaches for breakfast. I'm not sure what Rake's going to do to support them. I would imagine that Mass Stalker is his only option there. Unfortunately, he let himself get supply blocked, as both players unfortunately having a few slips. Like for instance, Rake had 2 Colossi queued out of one robotics facility while the other wasn't doing anything, which is just a natural slip, especially when you're heavily engaged in micro like he was. He was microing his Colossi really nicely up and down these cliffs, and that's one of the things that can happen as your hockey slip. Finally taking this gold expansion out, and we're just seeing so many laser beams go to work on this hatchery here. So now we're seeing Rake pulling back, and after doing so much damage, and these Corruptor will counter these Colossi really effectively, and there's so many. And these Corruptors finally going to work, but now we're seeing Stalkers come in, lots of anti-air, which will work on these Corruptors nicely. And these Roaches being caught a little bit out of position, especially with so many Colossi. I can't believe we're seeing so many Colossi. This has got to be a terrible situation, even with a bunch of Corruptors for Elwar with that expansion offline. It's going to be a huge chore for him to deal with.